The shadows grow long, and the spirits are restless. We must heed the warnings of the ancestors.
No one in Omiru Village dares to stay outside once the clock strikes 6 p.m. Doors slam shut, lights go out, and the night comes alive with fear. Deep footprints appear by morning, and sometimes people vanish without a trace. This haunting story follows Hannah, a young woman who dares to question a terror that has ruled her village for years. As secrets buried in tradition begin to surface, she discovers that the greatest danger may not be what walks in the dark, but what hides in plain sight. A chilling tale of fear, deception, and courage that will keep you listening until the very last moment. No one needed to check the clock in Omiru Village to know when evening was close. The air always told them. It would turn cold too quickly, even on hot days. The wind would slow down, as if it was holding its breath. Birds would disappear into trees, and even the insects would stop singing. That was when people began to hurry. Hannah felt it that evening as she tied the last knot on the basket of vegetables resting on her head. "Mother, we should go now," she said softly. Margaret, her mother, was bent with age and sickness. Her eyes were cloudy, and her legs shook even when she stood still. She nodded but did not move fast enough. "I'm coming," Margaret replied, though her voice lacked strength. Hannah glanced toward the sky. The sun was already sinking, spilling red light across the horizon like something wounded. Fear tightened in her chest. They had stayed too long at the market. All around them the village was changing. People abandoned their stalls without argument. A woman dropped a basket of dried fish and did not look back. A man pulled his crying child by the arm, ignoring the scraped knees and protests. Doors slammed shut. Pots crashed and shattered. No one stopped to help anyone else. "Leave it. Run. Get inside." The warnings came from every direction. Hannah checked the small watch tied to her wrist. 5:57 p.m. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her mother's hand and began to walk faster, almost dragging her. "Mother, please," Hannah begged. "We can't be outside." "I'm trying," Margaret said between painful breaths. "Slow down." But Hannah could not slow down. Not tonight. Not ever. The rule was simple and absolute. No one stays outside after 6:00 p.m. No one argued with it. No one questioned it. People who did were no longer around to tell their stories. They turned onto their narrow path, their compound finally in sight. Relief flooded Hannah's chest. Then she heard it. A bell. It rang once, low and heavy, shaking the air itself. Hannah's mouth went dry. 5:59 p.m. "Run," she whispered desperately. They reached the compound gate just as the second bell should have rung. But it didn't. Instead, every lantern in the village went out at the same time. Darkness swallowed Omiru whole. Not the soft darkness of night, but something thick and heavy, like a blanket thrown over the world. The bell stopped mid-sound, as if someone had grabbed it from the air. Hannah felt the cold rush into her bones. "Mother," she whispered. Margaret stood frozen at the doorway, her hand trembling in Hannah's grip. Then the time changed. 6:00 p.m. Something moved outside. Not fast. Not loud. Low. Heavy. Thud-thud. The ground seemed to sink under each step. Whatever it was, it walked like it owned the earth. Hannah slammed the door shut and bolted it, pulling her mother inside. "Don't talk," she whispered urgently. "Don't cough. Don't breathe loud." They sat on the floor in total darkness. No lamp. No candle. No moonlight. Only the sound of Hannah's heart and her mother's quiet shaking. The footsteps stopped. Something stood near the window. Hannah could not see its face, but she saw its feet through the thin crack below the wall. Too long. The toes bent the wrong way, pressing deep into the earth as if the ground welcomed it. Margaret covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. The thing stayed there for a long time. Then it moved again. Thud-thud. The sound faded into the distance. No one slept that night. When morning came, Omiru Village woke up screaming. Footprints were everywhere. By midday, the entire village of Omiru had gathered at the square. No one was sent to call them. Fear itself did the work. The footprints were still there. The sun stood high and hot, yet the marks in the red earth remained deep and sharp, untouched by heat or wind. Children were pulled back whenever they got too close. Even the strongest men avoided stepping into them. Hannah stood beside her mother, holding her arm tightly. Margaret had not spoken much since the night before. Her eyes followed the footprints as if they were alive. At the center of the square, the elders sat on their wooden stools, their faces heavy with worry. None of them looked surprised. That scared Hannah more than anything. Then the crowd parted. Madame Eliza arrived. She walked slowly, leaning on her carved walking stick. Her gray hair was wrapped in dark cloth, her neck covered in beads and charms. People lowered their heads as she passed. Some whispered prayers. Others pressed their palms together nervously. This was the woman who spoke to the unseen. Madame Eliza stepped into the middle of the square and stopped directly on one of the footprints. She closed her eyes. The air shifted. Hannah felt it on her skin, the same cold she had felt the night before. Madame Eliza's body stiffened. Then she screamed. The sound was sharp and sudden, slicing through the square. Women cried out. Men jumped to their feet. "The earth is wounded," Madame Eliza shouted. "The soil remembers blood." Silence followed. She opened her eyes slowly, scanning the faces around her. "Years, they demand balance," she continued. "A life must enter the forbidden forest willingly. Only then will the night release Omiru." Silence fell like a stone. No one spoke. No one moved. Hannah's heart pounded loudly in her ears. She looked around, at the crying mothers, the shaking elders, the children clinging to their parents. Fear was everywhere. Before she could stop herself, Hannah stepped forward. "I will go." Gasps filled the square. Margaret turned sharply. "Hannah, no." Hannah swallowed hard. Her voice shook, but she stood tall. "If this is because of our past," she said, "then let it end with me." People stared at her in awe. "She is brave," someone whispered. "God bless her," another said. Madame Eliza studied Hannah closely. Something unreadable passed through her eyes. "The spirits have heard," she said slowly. That night Hannah could not sleep. Fear crawled through her chest. The image of the forbidden forest filled her mind. Dark trees, twisted roots, silence that swallowed screams. She turned toward her mother. "Mother," she whispered. Margaret did not answer. Hannah sat up. "Mother." She reached out and touched her arm. "Cold. Too cold." Hannah screamed. By morning the village whispered again. Some said Margaret died of fear. Others said the spirits had taken payment early. Hannah sat beside her mother's still body, her eyes dry, her heart burning. Fear had taken everything. And deep inside her something broke. The days after Margaret's death moved slowly, like the village itself was afraid to breathe. Hannah did not cry anymore. The tears had come all at once and then stopped, leaving behind something harder and colder. She sat through her mother's burial without speaking, without shaking, without asking why. The elders whispered prayers, and Madame Eliza stood apart, watching with unreadable eyes. The footprints still appeared every morning. Not everywhere now, only in certain places. Near the shrine. Around the meeting hall. Sometimes beside Hannah's door. The villagers took this as proof that the spirits were watching her. "She has been chosen," people said with both fear and admiration. Preparations began quietly. No celebration. No joy. Just whispered instructions and bowed heads. Hannah was told she would be sent into the forbidden forest on the night of the next full moon. She nodded when they told her. But inside, doubt had begun to grow. Started small. Hannah noticed that the footprints never crossed certain areas. Never near Madame Eliza's hut. Never near the storage house behind the shrine. And the marks, when she studied them closely, were always the same size. The same depth. The same strange curve in the toes. Too perfect. At night, Hannah stayed awake, listening. The heavy footsteps always began shortly after the bell, or when the bell should have rung. But sometimes before the darkness fully settled, she heard other sounds, softer ones, human ones, movement. On the third night after her mother's burial, Hannah saw something else. A shadow moving quickly toward the old shrine, just before sunset. Madame Eliza. Hannah's heart skipped. The seer disappeared behind the shrine moments before the air turned cold. That night, the footprints appeared again. Hannah did not sleep. By morning her decision was made. If fear had killed her mother, then fear would not kill her. She would face the night. When evening came, the village shut itself indoors as always. Doors closed. Windows were sealed. The bell stood silent, waiting. Hannah stood at her doorway. Her hands trembled. She stepped outside. The bell never rang. Darkness fell anyway. Cold rushed through her body, but nothing touched her. No claws. No hands. No spirits. To walk. Each step felt unreal. The village was silent, frozen in fear behind closed doors. She followed the path toward the shrine. And there she saw it. A figure bent over the ground. Carving. Drawing. Footprints. Hannah froze. Madame Eliza straightened slowly and turned. Their eyes met. Shock flashed across the seer's face. "You," Madame Eliza hissed. She raised her hands and muttered words under her breath, fingers twisting in strange signs. The air felt heavy, pressing against Hannah's chest. But nothing happened. Hannah's fear burned away, replaced by anger. "There are no spirits," Hannah said, her voice shaking but loud. "There never were." Madame Eliza lunged forward, reaching for her. Hannah screamed. "Come out," she shouted. "Come and see." Doors flew open. Torches lit the night. Villagers rushed out, confusion and terror written on their faces. They stopped when they saw Madame Eliza standing over freshly carved footprints. Silence followed. The seer's shoulders slumped. She fell to her knees. "There are no spirits," Madame Eliza whispered. "Only fear." Gasps filled the air. She confessed everything. The footprints, the bell, the stories, all lies, created to control the village, to make people obedient. The elders wept. The villagers shouted in rage. Madame Eliza was stripped of her title that night and driven out before dawn. When the sun rose, the footprints were gone. But Hannah did not feel victorious. She stood alone, holding her mother's memory, knowing the truth had come too late. Fear had already taken its price. Morning arrived quietly over Omiru Village. There was no scream, no gathering bell, no panic. The sun rose as it always had, spreading warm light across the red earth. For the first time in many years, people stepped outside without fear, blinking as if they had forgotten how morning was supposed to feel. Children were the first to notice. "They're gone," a small boy said, pointing at the ground. The footprints had vanished. Not faded. Not washed away. Gone completely. Villagers slowly gathered in the square, careful, uncertain, as if the ground might betray them again. Men touched the soil where the marks had once been. Women whispered prayers of thanks and disbelief. The bell stood silent, its rope cut the night before. No one tried to ring it. Hannah stood at the edge of the crowd, feeling strangely empty. The truth had freed the village, but it had not brought her mother back. Victory felt thin when weighed against loss. An elder approached her slowly. "We were wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "All of us." Others followed. One by one they bowed their heads. "We let fear lead us," a woman said. "We listened instead of thinking," another added. Hannah listened but did not respond. Forgiveness was not something she could give yet. That evening something remarkable happened. 6 o'clock came. Nothing changed. No darkness fell. No cold wind rose. The birds kept singing. The sky turned purple and gold like any normal sunset. People stood outside their homes, watching the light fade with cautious wonder. Some cried. Some laughed nervously. Some simply stood in silence, realizing how much of their lives had been stolen. Days passed. Then weeks. No one disappeared. No footprints returned. The forbidden forest lost its power and became just trees again. Children dared each other to walk near its edge, laughing instead of whispering. Omiru began to heal. The elders met to change old rules. No more blind obedience. No more secrets buried under tradition. They asked Hannah to join them, but she refused at first. Her heart was still heavy. Time softened the weight. Years passed. Hannah grew into a woman shaped by truth and loss. She became known not for fearlessness, but for clarity. When disputes arose, people came to her, not because she claimed to know spirits, but because she asked questions. She eventually married and built a life that was steady and honest. Love returned slowly, carefully, like something learning to walk again. Sometimes at sunset, Hannah would stand outside her home and watch the sky darken. No bell, no fear. Only night as it was meant to be. She never forgot her mother. And she never forgot how easily lies had almost destroyed an entire village. The real monster had never walked at night. It had lived in fear, fed by silence, and strengthened by deception. And once the truth was spoken aloud, it lost its power forever.